A couple quick reminders. If this is your first office hours that you're joining in, welcome. Thank you for joining in. We have weekly office hours from 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific time, weekly for those based in US and in EMEA. And then we also have monthly office hours as well for those based in APAC for folks as well. And so if you do have colleagues or individuals who are in the APAC time zone, feel free to forward and let them know. Outside of our weekly office hours, if you do have questions or items for the Semantic Kernel team, we're very heavily engaged in GitHub and we go through and triage those as a team daily for both discussions and issues. And so don't feel like you need to wait for office hours if you do have questions that come up. So just a bit of housekeeping there. Do want to remind everyone of a couple of links as well. So I'm going to put some items in chat. The first link shared is around some of our latest releases. And so I want to highlight that in Python, we had chatted about it and gone through some samples last time of MCP, but there are some further release enhancements for MCP integration of semantic kernel in this latest Python package and release. And then there are some additional features highlighted around support for prompts and samples, being able to create MCP server from an agent. And so lots of updates if you haven't had a chance to look through our latest Python package and release there. And then over on the .NET side, there are a number of changes in our latest release. And so I won't go through and exhaust all the entire list, but just wanting to highlight that there are some updates to Google Gemini. There is some updates to Open Telemetry, the Gen AI attribute, and a bunch of other items in the .NET side as well. And so if you haven't had a chance to look through the latest .NET update, we recommend you take some time to look at this release. I do see that Mark's on. Mark, is there anything in particular for this 1.47 release that you want to highlight in particular to the audience?
Oh, hey, Sophia. Let me just take a look. I think the MCP samples are, yeah, we've done a lot of kind of like updates there. Um, I, th yeah, I think that might be just looking through the list. Yeah, I think that's the main thing. Like there was a lot of kind of like bug fixes went in, but probably the MCP samples is the main thing, you know.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, Mark. And then for folks on the call as well, we went through some MCP demos and updates in our last office hours, and that recording is out. And so if you want to learn more in depth, that's a great place to go as well. And then so moving on from releases, there are a number of new blog posts that are out. There's a Python update around MCP that goes through support in detail. There is a guest blog that we have out as well that goes through with semantic kernel MCP server from a guest author within Microsoft as well. And then for A to A protocol, I want to highlight this as well as there's been a lot of questions and a lot of updates that we have as well. And so diving in the blog is really highlighting how semantic kernel can be able to easily function as an A to A server and efficiently be able to route agent calls to specialized services. And so we very quickly developed this interoperability story. This is live in the A to A repo, and we'll also be having updates that'll be coming into our semantic kernel repo. I know there's been a lot of community questions in the last couple of weekends, so wanted to cover that in detail. And one thing in the sample in the blog post that I want to highlight is when you're in the blog and you're running the sample, you notice that there's an agent card, and so that is displayed as confirming that the semantic kernel travel agent and the sample is very focused around a travel agent has been successfully discovered and is ready for the interaction. And so when you go through and then submit this request, you'll be able to initiate processing on the semantic kernel A to A server and be able to have the travel agent manager dynamically delegate tasks to then all the configured plugin agents. And so when you go through the sample in the blog, you'll be able to then, as you proceed from this agent card, you'll be able to see some of the streaming events and those messages in your console reflecting the different stages of the request handling that are going through. And then the streaming events can also contain the partial text responses in a production ready scenario. And so after you've gone through and successfully gone through and ran your agent. Upon completion, you'll then receive the structured JSON response similar to the following as well. And so I know there's been a lot of questions, a lot of items that we've gotten, and so we do want it to just cover this that our A to A solution is out. I'm going to put some links in chat to the blog post to where you can read more about the A to A protocol in Google's documentation and then the A to A repo as well, where this is live. But that's kind of the biggest updates from our side on Semantic Kernel. I know that we have a lot of folks on, so I'd love to open it up just to open discussion and questions that folks may have as well. So feel free to come off of mute, or if you want to put items in chat, I can read them out as well. I'm not seeing anything in chat. Are there any questions that folks have around Semantic Kernel this week that you're joining in with? We'd love to hear from you. And also, if there are things that you're building out that you want to share, have questions on, hey, Rory, I see your hand up. Would love to hear from you if you want to come off of mute.
Hi, Sophia. Thanks. On the A2A sample, I started to look at it, but I have to admit I didn't get too deep on it yet, but I was wondering if I could just get clarity. The A2A protocol is being used basically from that little CLI sample app to discover the travel manager agent. But then per the mermaid diagram, the travel manager agent is using a number of kind of agents and tools behind it. But all of that interaction, in other words, on the other side of the travel manager agent, is classic semantic kernel plugins and things like that, right? The A2A is just that initial CLI sample app to travel manager, or is A2A deeper into the agent interactions behind the scenes?
It's really on the semantic kernel side, like you're saying, all the different tools, plugins, and other items there. I do see that Ben is on because Evan, the engineer who worked on detail, he actually is based in Korea, not able to join. But Ben, from the diagram, and I can pull it up, it is all the semantic kernel plugins and tools in addition to the agent that then is just using the A to A protocol, correct?
Honestly, I'm not actually sure. I was out the week that that sample was created. Mark, do you happen to know?
Yes, yes. So my understanding is that what you said is correct. Like, that yeah, all of the implementation of the agent is all kind of like traditional kind of semantic kernel stuff, right? And basically there was the most of the work in actually supporting A2A was in converting our data types to the data types that are supported by A2A. But yeah, that's my understanding of how it works. Like, so it's a fairly so I think the good news, and it's a similar story then with MCP as well, is that the skills that you use to build agents and to build agentic applications using semantic kernel are applicable with these additional technologies. And you don't like things like functions and prompts, they just continue to be relevant even in this as these new protocols are emerging. So hope that answers your
Thank you.
question. Yeah.
Other questions folks may have, we'd love to hear from you. Not seeing anything in chat, but feel free to come off of mute or put items you have in chat. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, I have a quick question. There is a how the extensions.ai, they released a new template with Aspire and basic Blazor app and using a lot of the extensions.ai. It would be good to see that if semantic kernel is also kind of integrated to that so that we have a complete sample that uses the extensions A template with the semantic kernel.
Yeah, so I know that there are some samples out. There's actually a joint blog that we're working on between the Microsoft Extensions.ai team and Semantic Kernel, so that will be coming out shortly as well. Another good way to be able to look at some of the samples is we had probably in office hours about a month ago, in-depth walkthrough from the Extensions.ai team and went through some of the questions. But there is kind of two different philosophies between the two. So I know there are some samples out with the use semantic kernel as well, but happy to dive into it. I see your internal more one-on-one as well if you want to chat outside of office hours and we can go through the sample together.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Perfect. Thanks so much for the question. Other questions that folks may have? I see a hand up. Vikas would love to hear from you if you want to come off of mute.
Yeah, yeah, hi, hello everyone. So I have created one demo in Semantic Kernel for agent collaboration for partners, and I am trying to collaborate with four particular agents. But in the selection functions, like the example, like go one after another, we give instruction for agent selections. So I'm unable to infuse a human-like behavior in that chat. Like if I trigger that particular agent chat, after first agent output automatically second gets called upon, correct? That's how it is working. But I'm unable to make it as a proper chat like scenario where somebody's I have to wait for the answer and then agent decides for the next particular agent to get executed. That was one question, like how to handle this. Also, in the same scenario, the scenario is like I am generating SQL from the NLP for the agent collaboration. So every time I give NLP to agent, it goes and generate the SQL. No worries. But I have to make it dynamic, like caching the schema somewhere to reduce the token size. So some idea, some input I need over there. For example, I have 1,000 users and everybody is going in the chat to generate some particular thing. So every time I don't want agent to go and burn out the tokens for the schema. So let's say if I'll take the schema in the cache or in anywhere, and I want to generate SQL from that cache. Is it possible to generate without using tokens, like without consuming much of a tokens? These are the two questions, which is the current challenge for the demo, which I have to showcase. And third one is like how to deploy it in production, that I'm still unable to figure it out. Like I'm new to this, so I've created everything in console application in .NET framework. APIs of semantic kernel. Everything is working fine, but I have to deploy it in a production environment like app service or anywhere where I can showcase like how to use it as a professional way. So I have three questions from my side. Maybe I
Okay.
may missed the previous sessions, but you can guide me for the three couple of things.
Yeah, great to hear that you're diving into semantic kernel. This is the perfect place to come for your questions and diving in further. Let's take the second one first around some of the pieces with SQL and some of the token issues that you're having. I see we have Wesley on around some of our vector store work, but would love to understand a bit more. Actually, I see Mark's off mute too, but from either of you for that second question.
Second question was regarding giving it human interface, like so I have four agents. So if I invoke a prompt after one and another, it automatically gets called upon agent one, agent two, agent three, agent four. So it's not like a chat actually. We say it's a group chat, but it's a direct flow going to the agent number four as a termination
Oh, so your
agent.
first question. Yeah, for the first question, I think this is a really good scenario for our process framework because it sounds like you have a step that you want an agent to work through and then another step from there. So
Yeah.
there's a agent orchestration sample that I'll put in chat for .NET. But I'm sorry for your second question around SQL. Wanted to hand that over to Wesley on our team to dive into further if that works.
Can you just repeat the question, Vikas, the second one that you had?
Okay, so second question was regarding the schema, and third was regarding the deployment. So I think so someone has put it in the chat. I may connect with them. So schema is like I have created one agent which is going to Azure SQL database and generating the particular SQL from there. So what currently what I did, shall I share my screen? Is it good to have of VS Code?
Sure. Yeah, you can
Okay,
certainly
sure.
share.
That will make something better to understand, I believe. It's a smaller thing, but maybe I am missing something over here. Let me know if it is visible to all of you.
Yep, it's visible.
Yeah, sure. So here, see this code, what I'm trying to build it up here. This is a sample demo which I created. Yeah. So I'm asking a question to here, like, for example, tell me the list of sales store. It is able to generate a SQL, and it is able to, another agent is executing this particular SQL as an executor, and third agent is summarizing the output of this particular row output of the table, and fourth one is the reviewing agent to just have some suggestions. I'm just as a dummy, and I'm logging it in Cosmos database as an entire chat log. So second time, if I'm asking it, I'm using vector store to store the history to check like if it is matching question, then I'm not searching it again. But the question here is like every time whenever I'm going to ask the question, this particular generator agent will go in the database and get the schema and run the query. So I have currently I have not made it dynamic, because if I'll make this dynamic, it is going to consume tokens. So currently I have referred some of the GitHub where it was statically used. I'll show up the function as well. So in database description, in the kernel description, kernel function, I passed a couple of tables. So passing the description over here doesn't consumes any token because it's a part of a program, I believe. But I need this similar kind of feature. If I'll cache this particular schema from the database, let's say I have 10 to 20 tables in the database, which I do have. So I need all the columns need to be fetched and query that particular cache to generate the query, so that I don't need to go to database and um, do all this calculation. So so the question was, can we do this or not in semantic kernel? That was my question. Like, if I'll cache this in, let's say, in memory vector store or some variable or texture variable anywhere, and if I ask to query this particular data, but not consume much of a token every time. So that was my second question. To Is it
So,
possible or not? That way.
so note that even this description, passing it in will consume some tokens because it will be passed to the LLM as a function description. When because otherwise the LLM doesn't know this information. It's still passed to it, and it will still consume some tokens. So I don't think there's a way to get around that aspect,
Okay.
if that makes sense.
Okay, no worries. I got my answer. Like,
Okay.
I tried enabling the logging, but I didn't got this description anywhere in the logging. That's why I asked this question actually.
Okay.
Yeah, I enabled the log. I seen every log after triggering this particular question. I can see all the prompts which are a part of agent or selection function, termination function. Every particular prompts comes in the log, but this description I didn't got in the entire log. That's why I got confused. Like, is it not consuming tokens? Very well and good. I shall do that way. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I actually I don't know if one of the folks on the chat or on the meeting that knows more about function invocation logging has any info about how this can be logged as well. But yeah, typically this is just passed
Okay.
as function invocation descriptions on the call, and it is essentially passed to the LLM as well. By the way, you can also add description in a non-declarative way. You can, it doesn't have to be done in this way in case you want to make this more dynamic and just pull the description from the database dynamically, and then you can build a kernel function essentially manually using a function call, and then pass in your description manually as well, or directly, using a string that you've built yourself, in case that is useful for you.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like I didn't able to reach that point because this is having a limitation of 1024 characters, this description point, and that was the way, like there is a limitation for this description variable.
Yeah.
How to do it dynamic, that also makes sense. Like if you have any couple of line of code, any references that makes help on this, I'll definitely infuse that. And my another question was regarding this selection function. So this I was talking about. So here we have given the instructions. So according to the documentation I followed and made this. So after the taking output of one particular agent, go to next agent. So whenever we invoke this, it executes in sequence. So there is no feeling of a chat over here. That I am trying to do some pause and again reply back. That was my first question actually regarding this section. It is definitely following a workflow or a prompt to flow what we want, but it's not like a chat actually, what we say it as a group chat. So that was my question. Third one, I believe someone has posted like how to deploy this, because this is a console application and I have to deploy it in Azure App Service or Azure Functions way. So it should be consumed like a chat. That I want to try. So maybe I'm missing something over here, how to deploy. These are the very simple questions from my side.
I can show you a sample. So instead of creating a console app, you can create a function app and use the program.cs for dependency injection, and then run the function, and then have a UI call that Azure Functions to communicate with the semantic kernel.
Okay, sure, I'll try. Kindly share me with some sample. I'll try.
Yeah.
And it will also work with group chat as well, or like a simple
Yeah,
chat.
I mean,
I understand.
anything that you do here, you can run it on as a function endpoint, right? And then the UI can call the function endpoint.
Great. I'll try. I know Azure Functions how to do it, but yeah, if you have some sample, that makes sense. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much for the help. And then if you do have any further questions as you're going through, because feel free to reach out to us in GitHub discussions, or to also come to other office hours. I really appreciate the questions. I do see we have a couple of other hands up, and I see some questions in chat. I'm going to go to one of our hands first, and I'll go to chat. Han, would love to hear from you if you want to come off of mute.
Hi, it's very similar to the kind of the first two questions that's asked really. I've started working on the multi-agents as well with Semantic Kernel, and it's very similar to Vicas's question. It's the multi-agents work very well when they kind of one links to another, interlinking within a loop. But I note what I want to do is similar to what he was kind of questioning is, how can you probably have to use Azure function to kind of invoke it for whenever it makes a decision. But I noticed that it's relying on the termination strategy to kind of stop invoking further kind of agents. I don't know if there's any other way, or that's the only way that's available, because I want to do the similar way with what Vikas wants to do as well, is to try and to impose a user input or pull a function. I wasn't sure if there's a way you can do that with the way it's coded with the termination strategy. You can work with something else to call like a function. That's what I was trying to work out, or started to think about the last few days. I wasn't sure if there is a way to do that, or Microsoft is kind of looking at a way to do that rather than relying on termination strategy, which is relying on keywords for it to stop calling the agents. going further in the loop?
Yeah,
So that's
really
just my
great
question.
question. Chris, is there kind of from the group agent and also even from our process framework, is there some items that you want to highlight and add? I saw in chat you were chatting about some of the errors, but didn't know for this situation in particular if you wanted to dive in.
Um, uh, yeah, sure. So I mean, I guess one thing that jumped out is the termination strategy can be anything. I mean, in the simplest case, it can be based on some keywords, but it could also be an LLM evaluation of the call state, the conversation state. Um, so there is that flexibility. The so I mean, just logically, of course, the termination condition is just determining, is the conversation completed. Um, the You mentioned something about human in the loop.
Yeah, just it's similar to Vipes's question, really. Like if there was something that the agent was unable to answer at that
Hmm.
moment, and then you
Hmm.
just feed in some more information, and it's able to kind of go further into the multi-agents. That's the thing I was kind of looking for, because I noticed that when you put in multi-agents, it just gives you one answer. I noticed that it's probably processing. I have to look. I've not looked at this closely, but you probably can create logging, because seen it. I've seen it written in Python where it can relay the messages coming back as a log. That
Yes,
question is, can you do that? I'm sure you can do it in C sharp. That's the thing I haven't looked at yet. I'm sure you can do that, and then you can see how the agents are communicating with each other. And then so there's what I notice is you can't intervene further. You let it process going through all of the loops,
got
and then
it.
it gives you the
Yes.
final. Then it gives you the final answer. There's nothing really in between. So
Yep.
sometimes I want it to kind of get it to kind of refine the answer, or it questions you back, and then you feed in more
Yep.
input, and then it goes into the loop process. That's the
I hear
thing I
you.
wanted to see whether it's possible or
So
not.
one approach that I've used with when this has come up in other situations working with other customers is, you know, uh, that so number one, you know, once you start using the selection strategies, um, it often becomes apparent um, that using like structured output for the selection or termination strategy can be useful because uh, having the model respond in the form of a JSON schema gives you, clear data structures to parse, and it can also, like for instance, uh, for the terminate or for the selection strategy, instead of just saying, "Oh, this is the agent name," and hoping it doesn't add any extra words, you can have a JSON schema where the first property is agent name and the second property is like reason, where the model can explain itself, and having that kind of
Okay.
insight of not just what is the result, but like what's the basis for the model's decision can be super helpful. Pivoting to the termination condition, then, if you're using structured output, you could maybe check for several conditions. One, is user input required? Has the answer, question been fully answered? And then, reason, explain yourself. And then, uh, as part of the result parser for the termination strategy, you can translate that response from JSON into parse it into an object model. And then you can make the decision, is the conversation over by saying, oh, do I need user input, or has the question been answered? So you can like kind of examine a more complex state to make that decision. Do I need to pause or not? And then the and then just as a note, if say you're getting user input, and then you're going to re-invoke the group chat, which is supported, it's possible, but you'll have to clear the is complete flag. Just set chat dot is complete equals false, just so that it knows that that you're intentionally continuing the conversation.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. That's helped. Yeah, that's helped a fair bit. I was going to say, is there any code examples out there? Because I've not. That's quite specific. I've not really seen that level of detail in any code
You know,
examples.
there's been a few in our team channels, and but you make a good point. We probably could get an example with the number of times this has come up now. I think you're right. We should take an action item to have a good example on this.
Thank you so much. Thanks. That's helpful. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you so much for the question, Han, and feel free to follow up as you're going through further. And like Chris said, this is a really great point in sample that we'll look to get created as well. I see we have another hand up. Would love to hear from you if you want to come off of mute.
Yes, Sophia, can I go ahead?
Yeah, definitely would love to hear from you.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, all. So I have a question here. The thing is, so whenever we are making a function calling, we have came across a case where the return data from a function calling is above the token limit, which is above 128K. So is there any way how can we handle this scenario when calling from when the data returned from a function is or a kernel function or a kernel plugin is more than the limit? I just want to get the overview of it. How can we handle it? Or is there any way where semantic kernel is handling uh, that?
So, yeah, my first recommendation would be to consider whether the data that is returned by a function is actually needed to be provided to LLM or not.
Yeah. Actually, the every data is needed. That's the case here.
Is it needed for LLM to reason about this data, or is it only needed
It's
as an input for the other function?
no. The data is needed for the LLM, for the
Because
agent to
yeah,
give the response.
because if the data wasn't
It's
needed, the advice would be to keep that data client side, and for example, just like allow LLM to call a function, and that function would return you an ID. You would pass that ID to LLM, and LLM will call the other function with that ID, and the other function will be able to get that state which you would save somewhere locally by that ID. This way, you would probably avoid just like passing the data to LLM, and LLM would pass the data back to the client. On the other hand, your case is different as far as I understand, and you want LLM to reason about this huge amount of data.
Yeah.
I would probably look at the way of splitting the data if that data can be split. For example, if it's
Yeah.
like CSV file that can be split by rows, for example, and basically the idea is to partition it and provide to LLM chunk by chunk, and then somehow merge the result from it. That would be
Yeah.
another sample of it.
Yes, but we are doing the same thing. But if we do that, right, we won't be able to use function calling effectively. So what we are doing currently is, so we are manually calling the multiple LLMs at a time. We are chunking the whole data, and we are calling the multiple LLMs at a time. We are not using semantic kernel there. So we are manually calling. So let's say if we are chunking the whole data into 10 parts, and we are manually calling the 10 agents at a time, and we are getting the response from the 10 LLMs, and we are constructing a new response from the 10 responses. So, but at the time we are not able to leverage the function calling there. We are just we are just using the normal from the input. We are using some regex, and we are calling the we are manually calling the APIs, and we are getting the data. After getting the data, we are making the agent calls. So is there any way where a semantic kernel can achieve it?
It's interesting case. It's the first time, to be honest, I've heard about. And like, what would be example of the data you're saying to LLM if it's okay to share? Is it
I may not be able to share that data.
okay?
It's
Yeah,
it's a confidential data. Yeah.
got you.
Yeah,
Yeah, unless other folks have a solution. So
yeah.
the only solution is to basically partition that data.
Yeah.
Yeah, a couple of things is that, the context window depends on the language model also. I don't know which one you're using.
We
So if
are
it's
using ChatGPT 4.0.
okay.
Yeah.
That should be what at least you have close to 1 million tokens. So I don't know how we are getting constrained by the size.
Yeah.
If it's a smaller model, it'll be 128K, but if it's a larger model, the size should not matter. Like, let's say if it is, to me, that's when you use vector databases, right? So you have to create, vectorize some of these documents and then look for similarity search so that you can reduce the content that you're using to call the language model with. So if you have your content, first vectorize it and do a vector similarity search and get that content and then call the language model for.
Yeah, we are doing that, but in this case, we should not do vector search on it. It's not a vector searchable. That is what we have come across. So we need to provide the text input itself. We have came across we have done multiple things on it.
See, the Gemini has 2 million tokens, right? So if you can send a whole lot of things when you're calling the Flash 2 because of the large size token.
Okay.
So that's something that you can choose.
What I would like to know is whether semantic kernel can do the partition and call the uh, multiple agents multiple parallel calls to multiple agents, and can it handle the function returned data is what I'm curious to know. You got my point?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I can think of is that you have some tools or plugin with semantic kernel to do that, and then use semantic kernel with that. That's the only
Yes.
thing I can think of. Maybe some functions or tools and had that as a plugin with the semantic kernel.
Oh yeah, we added that. So basically, the plugin which we added is sometimes returning more than 128K tokens. When we add it, it is overflowing the token size, token count we have. So at that time, what we are switching the mode from semantic kernel to a normal mode where we are chunking the data. What we are again making a call according to user. We are making a simple API call and getting the whole data. We are chunking the data, let's say, into 10 parts, and each part we are making separate 10 LLM calls. We are getting the response from these 10 LLMs parallelly, and we are again creating the response of this 10 LLMs. That is what we are doing. So in the same way, can we able to achieve the same thing using the semantic kernel is what I would like to know.
Yeah, that's totally possible to do. You can add multiple. You can add multiple OpenAI connectors, one for each model or for the same model, and you can identify them individually with service IDs. So using semantic kernel, you can add multiple connections. I would say, even for different providers, it doesn't need to be OpenAI. It can be Olama or Gemini or any other, and you can just, when you have your color, your implementation, right? So you just specify what is the model ID. There can be even different models that you want to target for the same provider, and you have those answers within a loop or in a parallel call as well. It's totally possible.
Okay, but from the plugin, can we achieve it from the plugin? Or
yeah, from the plugin, you can in a plugin, when you implement the function of the plugin, you can have access to the kernel. So you can put the kernel as a parameter of your plugin, and within your implementations of the plugin, you can get that kernel injected there and access the services from the kernel from within the plugin implementation. you can do that as well.
Okay, so you mean to say from the plugin again we can make a OpenAI call,
Yep.
correct? So OpenAI is
Yes.
again is making the plugin call. Plugin is again can make it 10 OpenAI calls again, correct?
Yeah. So within a plugin, you can have a reference for the kernel, right? So within that plugin
Okay.
implementation, you can make
Okay.
another
Okay.
plugin call or.
Okay, got it. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Roshan. Yeah.
You're welcome.
Great, thank you so much for the question. Oh, sorry, go for it, Sergey.
Yeah, there is also alternative solution you can explore with one chat completion and with one plugin. So you may have a plugin with a parameter where the parameter would be chunk number, and in your prompt you may say, "Hey LLM, my data is coming in 10 chunks," and each function call will provide you one chunk, and my data is having 10 chunks, for example. And you can leverage the parallel function calling, which allow model to call more than one function at the same time. And in this case, if you do the prompt in this way, and if you advertise the function with that parameter, LLM may decide to call 10 functions in parallel, and each function call will have a chunk number starting from 0 to 9, or from 1 to 10.
Okay. Yeah, but even if we use that, all of that will come under one context and it overflows the 128K count, right? Even if we use the 10 parallel function calls. It comes under one conversation, right? One
Yes.
conversation ID.
Yeah,
Thread.
you may just like do a little bit of prompt engineering and just to prompt it, saying, "Hey, just like don't do more than two chunks at a time," or something like that. So
Okay.
it will basically do 5 calls, 5 iterations, and doing the 2 chunks per iteration.
Okay.
Something like that. But again, so that probably will come at a cost, because over the time your chat history will collect all the chunks, and again, you probably need to do kind of like chat history trimming after each iteration, because otherwise you will reach a point where the content in chat history will be more than max token size for your LLM. So yeah, I think that a bit of experimentation need to be done there.
Okay, got it. Yep. Yeah, I'll try to do with the scenarios what we have discussed here. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Daria. Thank you so much for the question. And if you do have any follow-up questions, feel free to reach out to us in office hours or in our GitHub discussions as well. David, I saw in chat you had some questions around multi-agent orchestration. It looks like it was from different services. There were a number of links that Chris has shared, but was there anything in addition that you wanted to follow up with? Feel free to come off of mute, as we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, sure. So what I mean is that instead of deploying all the agents together, so it is basically very tightly coupled. I'm trying to, I don't know, or I visualize it as a microservices architecture where each agent, for instance, could be deployed as a different Kubernetes deployment, for instance, and then there should be an orchestrator that it could, I don't know, discover all the agents that they are deployed and use them if they need it. I mean, something like that. But I don't know if it's possible already. So maybe it's just something that it will come in the future.
There is already a sample showing 2 agents. One agent is summary agent and the other one is translator agent. And those agents are project of Aspire solution, which mean that, again, so they're deployed on Azure as a Kubernetes nodes. I may be wrong, but like anyways, so they're deployed on the Azure side, and they're exposed as REST API endpoints. And there is a third, like a service, which is process, that is consuming those agents via the HTTP protocol and talking to them via the HTTP. So I've shared the link to the sample. Please have a look, and I think that would be a good start. Just to look at it and build on top of it or build similar solution.
Yeah, so or trying to create kind of a distributed group chat where every agent could be deployed independently, and there may be a service that has the group chat, for instance.
Yeah, for your case, instead of process, you will need just to create a group chat and like basically point the agents of that group chat to the REST endpoints where the actual engine will be implemented.
But for that, I guess that I have to create a plugin that it has to call the REST API and so on and so forth, right? Some
most
kind
likely,
of, so
yes.
the same as yeah. So it's like the integration we have with the AI agent service in Foundry.
Yep.
Yeah. So, but yeah. So I was thinking about something more cloud native. Like you don't have to, let's say, create a wrapper in order to call a different agent. So, but I don't know if that is possible already.
And saying wrapper, you mean like a web service or?
No, because I'm when you create, for instance, a group chat and you got and if you want to call an AI agent from Foundry, for instance, what you have to do is you have to create a function within a plugin that is gonna use the SDK to call the AI agent service. So I guess that what you are mentioning is exactly the same, but for I don't know, a REST API, and that's all. So, but I'm thinking about a more cloud native solution, a more direct solution where you don't have to do all this wrapping. So that's why I guess that there are now protocols that they can be used to communicate to make agents to talk to each other.
Oh, yeah. So yeah, the sample I've shared doesn't use A2A, unfortunately.
Yeah, but I'm just, well, I don't know, thinking out loud. I mean, no. But what I see is if you want to have a group chat conversation, I mean, or a kind of a multi-agent solution, you have to deploy all the agents together, let's say. So it is it's tightly coupled. You cannot reduce one of the agents that you have already created. You have to, it's already in the same service or application. So I'm trying to decouple every agent so that they could be reused somehow. Yeah.
So the way how to do it is basically for decoupling. So just like wrap the edge agent into a web app, which will be scaled independently of the other agents, and they will be like a central agent that like would be always again so that can be modeled as a web app, and that central agent will basically wrap all the other agents which are web services as a plugins. So basically that central agent will talk to the other agents via the plugins. In this way, you can scale each agent independently in the way you want it.
Yeah, but again, in the orchestrator side, we are kind of wrapping the
right.
Yeah, so there is no any protocol yet to do that. I mean, or something like that or in the future may come. I don't know. So you just say, okay, I have these three different agents distributed in my cluster, and then I'll create a group chat with these three agents, but without the need to create any plugin or any wrapping. So you don't have to create any code to call them using any REST API. I mean, something that it's a native protocol to, so we leverage this agent-to-agent communication. But yeah, I don't know. Probably in the future.
Like there could be like auto discovery thing where you just like you'll
discover
your service will auto discover the other agents. Yeah.
Exactly. So kind of a registry of agents where you just, I don't know, have all the metadata of every agent, so you know what every agent does. So then you could, I don't know, create a group chat with all the agents you need, and that's all. But yeah, without the need of create this wrapping or of REST API calls and so on. But yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's a really great point. There's definitely folks on the AIP team that are looking into this. But definitely keep exploring and keep sharing items with us as well. I really appreciate all the questions. I do see another hand. Anish, thank you so much for your patience. Would love if you want to come off of mute.
Sure. Hi, am I audible?
Yes, yes, we can hear you.
All right. So I have a question about the agent group chat, which is about the human interaction in it, right? So the selection strategy generally, I have seen a lot of samples, and all of those samples talks about agent selection strategy. But conceptually, I understand that a group chat is where a bunch of folks trying to solve one problem by talking to each other, and human is very much part of it, right? Or the user is very much part of it. So how do you define the selection strategy from, an agent one to human and back to agent two and then agent three to human, that kind of scenario? How do you set that up in the selection strategy? Or maybe it's missing in the documentation, or I'm not finding it in anywhere.
Yeah, it's a really good question. There's a couple of simple, and you're in .NET, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, yeah, Chris, another good group agent chat. There also, when you're talking about human in the loop, there's also pieces of process framework where you could have agent orchestration there. But Chris, I will hand this one over to you as well.
Yeah. Hey, how you doing? So there's a couple different approaches that kind of that can be taken for support human in the loop. One approach might be a user proxy approach, where you define an agent that basically is a proxy for user input, user interaction. We do not have that in our repo at this point, and although we are looking at enhancing our human in the loop support, the process framework is great for human in the loop scenarios. But going back to group chat, the AutoGen is even, because we're working with AutoGen, collaborating, and they're even revising their perspective on human in the loop in terms of, should it be a user proxy, some type of proxy agent, or is it actually a conversation state where um, so in one case it's turn taking, and like you said, you can select the user proxy to take the next turn. The That doesn't always work out well in a lot of cases. Say for if you're deploying your AI application as an ASP web service API, you don't necessarily want the application sitting there blocking for how many hours waiting for user input. It doesn't mesh well into those types of patterns. And so when you start thinking about deploying applications and services in that fashion, it starts to make more sense that when you want human in the loop, it's actually a conversation state, and then the conversation can be stored and rehydrated whenever that input is received. So we don't have out-of-the-box support for user proxy, and but if to use the other approach, conversation state, it would be similar to what we were discussing earlier, where you can define your termination criteria. Instead of this focusing on the selection strategy, you'd focus on the termination strategy, and the criteria for the termination strategy can deal with, has the question been fully answered, or is user input requested? Tuning that prompt, you have to tune it a little bit, but basically you can check for multiple conditions, have the strategy return in the answer in JSON so it can be easily parsed by code, and then in the result parser for the termination strategy, you can parse that JSON and then make the determination, because selection is not going to occur if the termination criteria has been met. That's going to be it for the conversation. So I tend to focus on using that approach for termination criteria, as opposed to the user proxy. I think it's unless you've got some really deep nested complex scenario.
And understood. So here is one question. So instead of the user proxy, the termination criteria just throw the ball back to the user, is what you're saying?
Yeah.
Like asking for more information, and then the user types that in. Again, the process kicks in. And,
I mean, the final message in the chat, will probably be requesting something from the user, right? The it should, make it clear, so you yield to the user, they can view the current state of the conversation and understand what's being asked of them.
Yeah. And Chris, I see a little bit of gap in the documentation. I know the documentation is being built. So some for a person like me who is reading the selection criteria and termination criteria, it's a little unclear what happens. So for example, when the user types something, does the selection criteria kicks in next, and then one of the agent gets selected? Or does it go to the agent, and then only when agent to agent transfer happens, the selection criteria is being called? All of that information of, the flow type of information is missing in the documentation. And it's very hard for me to understand it. So what I did is I went into the code of agent group chat and saw that the max iteration is, based on that, it just keeps calling it. That's how I have to understand it. But I hope that the documentation is a little more,
Sure. Yeah, point taken. Thank you for that input. But to answer your question directly, yes, the selection strategy is used on every instance where an agent needs to be selected. There's kind of a hot path. There's an option in the strategy where you can say that you always want a certain agent to be the first agent, but that still goes through the strategy logic.
Understood. So between the user and the first agent, there is a selection criteria function gets called.
Absolutely.
Okay. Because in the selection criteria, we always say after agent A, it's agent B's turn. We never say, oh yeah, we do say after user speaks, it's agent 1 turn, right? That's where it kicks in.
Yeah.
Okay, got
it. Yeah, it would be nice. I just want to quickly share, like, if semantic kernel can do something like this, like in the autogen, like when I do is that I create a user proxy, and then when I say it's approved, and it's really interactive when I run this, right? So it just, let's say if I do something like this, first thing it asks me for an input, and then it starts interacting, and then when it stops, until I say approve, it keeps going back and forth. So I can say, so it takes the input, now it goes through this, and then again, it'll ask me, okay, what is that you want to do? Would you like me to go dive deeper? So I can say, elaborate on competitive analysis or something. And then it goes through, and then it runs something until I so this kind of an interaction would be good. One is user-based determination. The other one I've also tried with AutoGen is the number of turns. Okay, if you have 3-4 agents, after 5 turns, stop it so that I'm not going on a loop, right? So if you can incorporate that into the semantic kernel agent, that'll be really good.
Yeah, even AutoGen is rethinking their preference on user proxy versus other patterns. But yeah, user proxy is a valid approach, and you could support that, creating a user proxy from our base agent abstractions. everybody.
Great. Well, thank you so much for the questions. And Chris, you dive into that. And like you'd mentioned, there's definitely changes that AutoGen's looking at, but please keep all the questions and items that you have coming. I am putting in chat folks who are asking for the wider semantic kernel community. We're engaged very heavily in GitHub, and so both in discussions and issues we go through as a team and triage, and so that's a great place. And then our Discord is been merged with the broader Azure AI Discord server, and there is a lot of engagement from the community, and so that is focused primarily on community to community engagement, but there is a lot of engagement also from our team as well. And so I'll post both of those links for folks as well. If you do have additional questions, feel free to reach out on either of those mechanisms. But we just want to thank everyone for the time today and for diving into your questions, and we look forward to hearing from you soon. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.